The following is a CUNY TV special presentation.
As we all know, our city and region continues to recover from the devastating impact of Hurricane Sandy. We at ABNY have been working very closely with the city and the state on recovery efforts. We are pleased this morning to be joined by the city's Chief Service Officer, Diahann Billings-Burford, and who will give us a brief update on recovery efforts at this moment. Diahann, please come on up.
Thank you. NYC Service was launched 3 years ago, and I was appointed 3 years ago to change and to improve the way that our city government views our citizens. I think we have accomplished a lot in 3 years. We have already engaged 2.5 million New Yorkers in service, and we are about how do we use citizens as assets in our community problem solving. And Hurricane Sandy has actually put this investment of citizens in stark relief. And we have been able to see just how much we have been able to get done with citizens in addition to the great work that government is doing. To give you a little perspective, citizens and companies gave immediately. As soon as Sandy happened and we realized its impact, the Mayor's Fund opened up, not that we ever closed, but we opened up our ability to receive cash. And to date, we have more than $41 million, and that is New Yorkers and others who just care about our situation. We've used that $41 million or parts of it to help us on the ground immediately to get things like food and water and cleaning supplies. It allowed us not to have to go through certain procurement processes and to meet the needs of people that have been impacted by Sandy. It's also helped us to come up with a $5.5 million matching grant program for not-for-profits. I'm very excited about today's topic because this is some place where the city feels like we always must be building capacity. That will lead to a $26 million bridge grant program that will give not-for-profits between $5,000 and $10,000 in interest-free loans. We also, of course, help businesses. And so in addition to a 1% interest loan for businesses, there are certain businesses in some of the most impacted areas. Chelsea and I were out in the Rockaways together, and we just got to see how many businesses were literally down in the Rockaways and what it's going to take for them to get from where they are to back to producing is phenomenal. And so when the city received feedback that this grant program is great, but we really need grants, this loan program is great, but we need grants on top of it, we've also used some of the Mayor's Fund money to add a matching grant program for businesses that were impacted by Sandy, and especially small businesses. I want to wrap up and just say that I am very proud of the citizen service and how it has helped bolster the government. But I'm also incredibly proud of what our city government has done. We have taken, I think, great strides. I think we have a lot more to do. I know that even today, as soon as I leave here, I will have to go out to the Rockaways to help figure out if, in fact, I probably should tell Commissioner Ray this first, to figure out if the Mennonites can set up camp to help with some of the recovery efforts in the Rockaways. So we have tons to do, but we have done much. I hope that everyone here will listen to the work that is being done. I hope that, like the city, everyone here will figure out how can we build the capacity of the not-for-profits that are doing great work. And I hope also that we'll be able to come to you and say that we've done even more than we've done to date. And to date has been pretty good. We have met with local leaders to help come up with comprehensive community recovery plans. The mayor has lobbied for $15 billion in federal aid. We have used FEMA money to re-envision temporary housing. As opposed to only using the standards that are there, we've said, could we use the temporary housing FEMA money to run our rapid repairs program and have people's own homes become temporary housing so we can get heat and hot water and electricity back in their own homes and not have to move them anyplace else and not have to put up trailers. We have proposed tax relief for the hardest hit homeowners. And lastly, we have put up, and much thanks to Linda and her whole team, New York City Restoration Centers. And that allows our New Yorkers who have been impacted to go one place and get financial help and health help, to talk about FEMA reimbursement, to talk to SBA if they need to. And they only have to go to one place to get all of this done. And so we have done much, but we have more work to do, a lot more work to do. Just as this hurricane has been one of epic proportions, we believe that we are a city that does not quit. My tagline is to use your blank for good. NYC Service is about tapping the power of the people. And so we think this is a time for the power of the people to come out in epic proportions as well. And so we look forward to working with everyone here. I think everyone here, I see so many faces that have already done so much. Francis and I from Con Ed were literally just out cleaning a park yesterday. We also had Con Ed employees cleaning our Blue Belt in Staten Island. And so I look forward to everyone taking part, and I hope a way that you will take part is to build the capacity of these great not-for-profits that are going to speak today, because they're getting so much done. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Diana. The not-for-profit sector were one of the first groups to really organize themselves. If you go to Philanthropy New York website, you can see the list of all the different organizations that they cobbled together as a central meeting point to discuss how to effectively get the money out and not duplicate services. So you can access them from their website or for the ABNY website. So now on to our main event, and it's my pleasure to introduce our moderator for this morning's panel, Chelsea Clinton. Since coming to New York in 2003, Chelsea has been actively involved in the educational, philanthropic, and civic communities of our great city. Chelsea is currently a special correspondent for NBC News and is pursuing a doctorate at Oxford. She also works for NYU as an assistant vice provost for the Global Network University, working on international recruitment strategies and interfaith issues. Chelsea also does work for the Clinton Foundation, the Clinton Global Initiative, and she's also previously worked for McKinsey & Company and Avenue Capital. She also serves on the board of the Clinton Foundation, Clinton Global Initiative, and the Clinton Health Access Initiative, the School of American Ballet, Common Sense Media, and the Weill Cornell Medical College. I have known the Clinton family for decades. My dad, I met at that moment Governor Clinton when he was working with my dad and our good friend Liz Robbins, who's here, who introduced us. Liz, where are you? I saw you before. There she is. Many moons ago, fighting for state and local tax deductibility that was being put on the table by then President Reagan. And it's sort of deja vu all over again as we deal with that same issue today. It has been a privilege to work very closely with her parents on many different issues. And I know that Chelsea is also a very strong supporter of our ABNY's Young Professional Program, and we remain connected with her work through the Clinton Foundation and CGI. This past fall at CGI, Chelsea moderated an incredible panel. A young gentleman named Jack Andrica, who was an 8th grader when he began researching techniques for early detection of pancreatic cancer. Within 7 months, he had come up with an idea that cost 3 cents and took 5 minutes and revolutionized the way this terrible disease is diagnosed and potentially cured. He was amazing. The panel was amazing. The panel was called "The Case for Optimism for the 21st Century." I thought it very fitting since every day we continue to hear negative news all over the world. But we have to be optimistic, and Chelsea is at the forefront of making sure that there are efforts underway to deal with so many of our issues, whether it be local, national, or international. Chelsea's dedication to philanthropy and public service is unmatched, and we are excited to have her here today with 3 nonprofit leaders that she has worked closely with to discuss the importance of nonprofit sector and how we can all work together to make New York a better place to live, work, and visit. Ladies and gentlemen, it is now my pleasure to introduce Chelsea Clinton.
Thank you, Bill, and thank you to ABNY and your terrific staff for inviting me here this morning and for allowing me to bring along a few people and organizations that I admire tremendously. This month is actually the 25th anniversary of my first trip to New York City. My parents brought me here in 1987 in December as an early Christmas present. It very much was still when I believed in Santa Claus. So Santa arrived on Christmas morning in Little Rock, Arkansas. But I very much felt like Christmas arrived early when my family came to New York. We went to Rockefeller Center and ice skated and saw the big tree. We saw the dazzling Rockettes. We went and saw Cats on Broadway. I was slightly disappointed, as I would have told Mr. Loda if he were still here, when the subway car that we were riding as we went back to the friends we were staying with's home didn't spontaneously burst out into song and dance. Although that didn't happen, I was enchanted, and I knew that this was a place that I someday wanted to live. And indeed, in 2003, as you heard Bill mention, I moved here, and now this is where my husband and I call home, and I cannot imagine living anywhere else. Diahann, thank you for your eloquent update on what is happening in our city and the ways in which our city has once again come together to move forward and to give all of us reasons to be optimistic, even while there are still so many challenges that remain from Sandy and that are pre-existing of Sandy's impact in our city. And when ABNY asked me to come this morning and agreed that I could invite along a few friends, it was many months before there was even a specter of Sandy on the horizon. And one of the reasons I invited the three people who are on stage with me here this morning is that I think so often our most vulnerable, our children, are not thought about in a coherent way, not only here in New York City, but in our national dialogue. And that was something I felt particularly over the summer, in full candor, during our election season. That may now seem a long time ago, but we did just have an election about 5 weeks ago. And in all of the conversations around what should happen with entitlement spending, what should happen with our national security, whether or not climate change was going to be on the agenda in any of the debates, very rarely did we hear a conversation about our nation's young people and our nation's children. And in New York City, 1 out of every 5 kids relies on a soup kitchen or a food pantry for a meal on a given day. And yet also in New York City, 1 out of every 5 kids, before they walk into kindergarten, is already obese, and more than 1/3 of the kids in our public schools are obese or overweight. And so many of those kids are the same kids, because so frequently there is a collision of poor nutrition, obesity, and poverty, which we see refracted painfully in our public school system. And we know how important nutrition is to kids' ability to learn, to become leaders, and to graduate. And in 2011, although it's terrific that we reached a recent record of a 65% four-year graduation rate, that's not a statistic yet to be proud of. And yet we know that we have made progress. And so I do think there are reasons for optimism. And so before we begin our conversation this morning, I'd like to ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves and to give brief introductions about their work. And so hopefully it becomes imminently clear to all of you why I hoped they would join me this morning. Josh, do you want to go first?
Thank you, Chelsea, and thank you for inviting us here. I'm Josh Wachs. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at Share Our Strength, a nonprofit devoted to ending childhood hunger in America. To add on to a few of the statistics that Chelsea gave you, 16 million kids in this country are at risk or struggle with hunger, 900,000 here in New York State. And yet, this is a country of plenty of food. And as Chelsea said recently, this is perhaps the most persistent moral issue of our time. 16 million kids struggling with hunger, and yet food and food resources are out there. But less than half of kids who qualify are actually getting a free, nutritious school breakfast to start their day. And during the summertime, when kids are most at risk of hunger, a very small percentage of kids here in New York City are accessing over 300 sites where any child under 18 can walk up and get a free summer meal. So our work with our No Kid Hungry campaign in New York is essentially focused on 3 elements. Number 1, making sure that kids who need it get access to a free, nutritious school breakfast to start their day so that they are ready to learn. Number 2, in the summertime, when kids are at the highest risk of hunger because they don't have access to those school meals, that kids are able to get nutritious food they need. And number 3 is teaching kids and their families, low-income kids and their families, the empowering skills they need to be able to shop for, prepare, and cook healthy, nutritious meals on a limited budget. So how do you take families' limited food budgets and stretch those dollars, get the most nutrition bang for the buck that really helps combat both hunger and obesity?
Terrific. Erica, we talk a little bit about City Year?
Yeah. So good morning, everyone. I'm Erica Hamilton, the Executive Director of City Year New York. I have the pleasure of working for and leading an organization that is dedicated to one cause, and that is ending the dropout crisis. And the way that we do that is we basically get groups of very young, energetic, socially entrepreneurial young people to dedicate a year of their life in service through the AmeriCorps program to come and work in schools, basically in high poverty neighborhoods. So typically in communities where a child has equally the same chance of graduating from high school as not. That is a very profound statement, I think, especially as a parent, especially as a citizen, not only of New York, but of this country, has tremendous ramifications in terms of workforce development, in terms of the life quality these people will be able to have on an ongoing basis. Here in New York, we currently work in about 22 schools in some of the highest need boroughs, and we have the pleasure of having 300 young people. We have one of whom is in the audience today, Lauren, wearing a red jacket, who, yes. Thank you. But we have nearly 300 souls like Lauren who have decided to take a year of their lives to commit to service to helping students on 3 pursuits. One is with attendance monitoring, so helping to make sure kids actually are showing up to school no matter what challenges they may face in doing that. The second is behavioral coaching, so making sure that students are getting the socio-emotional support they need to be present in the classroom and to be able to learn. And the third is academic support, so actually tutoring students in key areas that they need to stay on track and on time in terms of their path towards graduation. So I will stop there.
And Rain, and in full disclosure, Rain works for the Alliance for Healthier Generation, which is a partnership between the Clinton Foundation and the American Heart Association. I have said before that I hope that every family has the same sort of transformative experience in a loved one after heart surgery as certainly my father underwent after his quadruple bypass in 2005, in which he radically changed his diet and his lifestyle. Selfishly, I hope that that now equates into many more decades of life ahead of him. And he asked the American Heart Association what he could do to help them with heart disease. And they responded quite succinctly and said, if you want to help us with heart disease, the thing that you can do is to try to help us tackle childhood obesity. Because any healthcare reform that we have, any changes in preventative medicine targeting the elderly, none of those will change the arc of our healthcare costs or the diminishing kind of life expectancy gains in our country unless we conquer and reverse the devastating trends in childhood obesity. And so my father started the Alliance for Healthier Generation, and I'm incredibly proud that it's now the largest anti-childhood obesity program in our country's schools. And that's why I'd hoped Rain would be able to join us this morning. And I am equally biased towards her as I am towards the previous 2 speakers this morning. Rain.
Thank you very much. It's wonderful to be here. So yes, the Alliance for a Healthier Generation has a national goal of reducing the trend of childhood obesity. what we really try to do is support sustainable systems change in the environments where children spend the majority of their times, and when you have parents and children, families and caregivers really at that point of decision making about sort of what to feed their children, how active their children should be, what kind of medical decisions they should make with their children about their children's health. And so doctors' offices, schools, communities, and Chelsea mentioned the work we do in schools. We work in 16,000 schools nationally, helping schools to implement sustainable systems and policy changes so that those schools can serve healthier school meals, so that they can have physical activity, so that they can have recess, all the things that children need to live healthier lives. And we do that in coordination with other NGOs and other nonprofits locally, so that schools and communities and doctors' offices create a local blueprint that makes sense for them, and we provide staff and support to help them implement that. And we've seen wonderful changes. We also work with companies all across the country on business practice change. A lot of folks know about the Alliance because of the work that we did directly with the beverage industry to remove high-calorie beverages from schools, and we've seen significant reductions in the number of calories shipped to schools. So essentially, using the Clinton Foundation model of bringing ideas to action, working across sectors to try to help people live healthier lives.
Great, thank you. Diahann was talking earlier about Sandy and the ways in which so many citizens and so many organizations responded so quickly to help the city fill gaps where it needed gaps filled, and to partner with the city to help have a coordinated, cohesive effort. Could each of you talk a little bit about kind of what you've seen in the populations you work with here in New York as the impacts of Sandy, and what your organizations have tried to do to ameliorate those impacts?
Yeah, so I can start. So our core, as I mentioned, the young people that come to volunteer their year in school, their year in working in a school, obviously wasn't working in schools that week when schools were fundamentally closed. What we had our core do was to honestly, and because the public transportation system was down, what we had the core do was try to reach out in the communities they resided in to figure out how they could lend their skills, their abilities, their experiences to helping in those neighborhoods. What we've also done is canvassed all of the schools that we partner with to understand how students and also how the staff has been impacted by Sandy, just in terms of their ability to be able to recover. We have one school in particular that's out in Sheepshead Bay, Brooklyn, that we work in, where we discovered not only were a substantial number of students impacted, but there were also significant numbers of teachers and administrators were impacted. So it was just a school that needed a lot of focus and a lot of triage. I think the way that we've been able to partner with the business community in particular has been to really do a needs assessment, and then to reach out to our business partners to find out, are there ways that you can donate skills, experience, time, resources? We've had a number of partners step up, most notably National Grid has done a tremendous amount in trying to coordinate employees to come out to the school to volunteer their time, and also to organize resource drives to get supplies and other needed equipment out to the community. So it's been a wonderful opportunity to continue to deepen collaboration with the business sector as well.
Josh?
So obviously, the hurricane impacted already vulnerable population of low-income kids and their families in a significant way in portions of the city. As Erica talked about, during that period when schools were closed, those kids didn't get access to school meals, for example, something that so many of those kids rely on really as the primary source of nutrition during their day. Share Our Strength was active in supporting a lot of local partners throughout New York in the emergency food response, and folks who have done amazing work like City Harvest and the Food Bank of New York City. What we have learned from past history in Hurricane Katrina, where we were very active in the long-term recovery, is that a couple months after a huge crisis like this happens, in fact, it starts to fade from the front pages. The emergency money starts to dry up, and essentially folks start to give much less focus to this issue. And so we believe and are focused on what are some of the long-term issues that are coming out of this, which are only starting to surface now around issues like food access moving forward. I'd also say just that, while this hurricane really serves very much just to highlight the same issues that so many families in this city are struggling with every single day of the year. So we think it's important to keep that in context.
Rain, I saw you nodding while Josh was talking.
I would exactly echo what my fellow panelists have said. And I think for us, given the work that we're doing, our constant message to the schools, the communities that we work with, is that it's always a marathon and not a sprint, that it takes time to address these issues of hunger, malnutrition, obesity. And so when a crisis like this happens, it's very easy to lose sight of sort of that long distance goal. So part of our support, our assistance, and our messaging and our work we do with other organizations is to try to continue to focus on what you can to achieve small successes, to celebrate those small successes, and to not lose sight of the end goal. And our job is to really help connect with local resources, help guide the schools, guide the communities to the best available resources. And again, I think it's always that message of it's a marathon and not a sprint, which is very difficult in times like this, but that's a big part of what we consistently provide.
You know, I think one of the challenges that exists in the nonprofit space and exists similarly in the for-profit space is kind of the pressure to innovate and to always start something, to kind of to prove that someone has kind of that entrepreneurial credential, when in reality there are so many solutions that are working somewhere. And one of the things I think we collectively need to do a better job of is celebrating people who have the courage to be second, who have the courage to learn from something that's working elsewhere and then translate it and repurpose it to work better in one's own individual community, but not to necessarily kind of feel the inordinate pressure of having to architect something completely bright, shiny, and new. Could each of you talk a little bit about how you've learned from something that's worked elsewhere, either in another program or another community that you've adopted into your own organizations? You're nodding.
Yeah,
Erica.
so I can, I'm also nodding and smiling at you because I think it's also about being self-aware and not having the ego where you always have to be the pioneer. Sometimes it's okay to be the settler, right? And so I'm nodding because, and I think it's apropos to this audience, the example I thought of instantly as I listened to you speak was some of the partnerships we have with some of our funders or people who provide support in in-kind ways in terms of working in an organization where we see partnership as a collaborative pursuit, not only from a fundraising standpoint, but also from an idea generation standpoint. Part of what I think, part of what I think our mission is as leaders in the nonprofit space is not only to attract people to support the missions and the programs that we offer, but really to attract people to this sector, to better educate them on issues that pan across all of the areas that we're serving, because they're all benefiting pretty similar communities. And so with that respect, I think of one partnership we have right now with Towerbrook, which is a financial firm, and essentially they've just provided some funding and also some in-kind supportive consultancy to help us figure out how do we improve best practice sharing across our sites. So this is a business that has a base in New York, a base in London. They fund 2 of our teams here in New York City schools, and then they also fund teams in London schools. And part of what they want to try to pioneer, if you would, is more best practice sharing, and it's something that we embrace, we're excited about, and we think there are tons of opportunities for us to learn from other programs. So that would be one example I would share.
Terrific. Josh?
So we believe that childhood hunger is a very solvable problem, and we don't think you need to reinvent the wheel to do this. And there are a lot of people who are working on the issue of childhood hunger from a series of different perspectives, and government, city, state, federal, nonprofits, corporations, foundations. The challenge is bringing those folks together, agreeing on a common goal, a common set of metrics, and then developing—
Are there any places where you think that works better? Are there any cities or states where you could point to and you could say, yes, like there is a cogent effort there?
Sure. In your home state of Arkansas, thanks to Governor Beebe's leadership, he's really tackled this issue of food insecurity in the state that was #1 in food insecurity, and also I believe close to #1 in terms of obesity rates. Right. And really brought together the public and private sector in a campaign that is about identifying the barriers that exist to kids being able to access the existing programs and help that they can get. And it's about maximizing government, it's about making government more effective, and about there being the political will to be able to do so, and to be able to draw on the private sector when needed to supplement those efforts.
And so to the people here in this room today, what could they do to help Share Our Strength have a more coherent and impactful campaign here in New York City to end childhood hunger?
Number one, awareness, right? People don't believe that this is an issue that exists to the extent it does in this city. So you can help spread the word. Number two, you can help create the political will necessary for this issue to get the attention it needs. So help us speak out to your elected officials and tell them about the importance of issues like school breakfast and summer meals and nutrition education. So really become an advocate for us. And then number three, essentially our model is based on private investment that unlocks federal dollars that are already there to feed kids. It costs us about $46 a kid to get a child access to school breakfast and summer meals throughout the year because those meals are already paid for by the federal government. So help us create the private funding to be able to unlock the federal funding that already exists to feed kids in this country.
Great, thank you. Rain.
For us, it's funny because when we started our initiative, the Alliance for Healthier Generation, people said, this is terrific. President Clinton is at the helm. You're going to do something innovative. Forget the government programs. Forget what already exists. Let's come up with something new and shiny. And we felt a lot of pressure to do that. And instead, we looked at a federal program that had tremendous success at creating healthy, sustainable environments, but that hadn't been funded fully. There were probably 8 years spent researching it. There was best practice. There was data, but it wasn't sexy. It wasn't exciting. It didn't get people's attention. And we looked at it and we thought, how do we streamline this? How do we take it, with a private nonprofit, and how do we roll it out across the country in a more effective way? And that's how we have our Healthy Schools program today in more than 16,000 schools. We have a presence in every state. The federal government program, unfortunately, has since completely been defunded, so we've become the default program in the country for this work. But the lesson there was, like I said, people wanted us to do something new and different, and there was a program that existed that we worked hand in hand with, so we didn't intend initially to overcome the program, but we really worked side by side. And so I think the lesson there was to sort of look at the programs that already exist and don't dismiss what the government is doing because it's the government. All that program needed was some additional support. It needed the platform of the Clinton Foundation to shine a light on the fact that there were successes that did exist. And what this program allowed for that many others didn't was local innovation, so that the people on the ground that had solutions that they know worked best for them were allowed to flourish. And as a result, we have this beautiful reciprocal relationship across the country where anytime people have ideas or things that are working on the ground, we as an organization can elevate those quite quickly. We can take them, we can turn them into, we have a mechanism for implementing them or providing them to other communities who can also be successful and learn from the lessons of one another.
I want to open it up to the audience for questions after I exploit my prerogative as the moderator for one last question. I love that we live in a city that has a chief service officer. And I love that it's Diahann. I'm glad that she also loves that. It's important to love your job, and certainly a privilege to serve. I was in awe of the statistic that she shared with us earlier, that there have been 2.5 million people who've participated in service in our city just in the last 3 years. Clearly, as we've seen again in Sandy, when tens of thousands of people have shown up to volunteer in so many of the most affected areas. New York City takes responsibility for itself, and we certainly take responsibility for our own. And so for each of you, if people want to get engaged, if people want to volunteer in your programs, if people want to be effective supporters, what can they do? Yeah, Erica?
Sure. So one thing is we love to partner with businesses and other institutions that can provide funding, always helpful, but also in-kind support. And so one thing we have is a practice where we will partner with businesses to sponsor teams in our schools. And for that, firms will pay a set amount of fee of the cost of a team of about 10 to 12 core members, those volunteers I mentioned, going into a school to provide all those supports to students, attendance coaching, the behavior monitoring, and the tutoring to students. We also partner with institutions to do service days. So if a firm wants to find one-off independent activities that they can engage their employees to do.
And Erica, could you give an example maybe of what?
Sure. So we had, great example is we had a firm into the office a couple of weeks ago at this point to come and help build resource source kits for families impacted by Sandy. And that actually involved a couple of other nonprofits. And that was a way for us to think about how can we contribute, opportunities we have for space or manpower to an organization that had resources and supplies, but didn't have the human capacity to actually get kits done. We've also done days where we had a firm, Greenlight Capital, that actually came out and did a service day in a school to help rebuild. It's a performance-based school. They're helping to rebuild the stage and the auditorium, the performance space for the kids, because right now it's a performance-based school, but they have no performance space because they don't have money within the budget to do that. And so what we do is we work with firms to really figure out what are your goals in engaging your employees in service, or what is the philanthropic practice you're trying to build at the firm. We think about the opportunities we can offer, and then we would structure something independent for that. And then the last quick thing I would mention, I'm eating up airtime. We also work with firms to do mentoring programs. So our focus is the dropout crisis, but one of the other wonderful things about our program is we have this wonderful core of impassioned young people who are very early in their career. We have a program right now, for example, we work with American Express, and what they do is they have their employees serve as mentors to the young people that are volunteering their time in school. And they're basically coaching them on professional development, they're coaching them on how to build a career plan post your year of service, basically thinking about ways that they can contribute to developing that core of young people that are volunteering a year of their lives to help kids.
Rain?
I'm happy to go. And I would say, given that we're trying to support schools over the long haul so that when things like this happen, they have a way to respond without losing sight of their goals for keeping kids healthy, I would venture that everybody in here knows somebody who works at a school. We all have teachers in our families, or you have a school in your community, you have kids who attend school. And I would say sort of, look to get involved. Is there a Healthy Schools program in place? Are there one of these programs that my colleagues represent in place? And see how you can bring your business acumen to bear. If you're a lawyer, can you help with their policies? If they're trying to create sustainable policies to make sure that kids are healthy for the long term, they often need help. There are wellness councils in place. There are other councils in place where they're always looking for volunteers. If you have business experience and you can help them look at other policies, at how they can maybe change their food and vending contracts. Schools need help, and everybody has something that they could give. So we'd be happy to fold volunteers in with any expertise to any school that we work with here in the city.
So I think it's important to acknowledge the mayor's tremendous leadership on this issue, and I believe setting an example really for cities around the country on the importance of service. We have a number of ways folks can get involved. First, a grassroots sort of boots on the ground ways. This summer, we had teams of volunteers going out and spreading the word about food resources that exist in summer meal sites around the city as part of really a public-private partnership with the city, with key city agencies under Linda's leadership, and with nonprofits. So we need the boots on the ground. Secondarily, through our nutrition education program, Cooking and Shopping Matters, we use volunteers who we train to be able to become nutrition educators and give supermarket tours with families to learn about things like unit pricing, why that's important, what produce you should buy fresh seasonally, but what you can get canned or frozen and get the same nutritional bang for the buck and save a few dollars. So we need trained volunteers for that. And then third really is around leveraging corporate assets around awareness. As part of our summer meals campaign this summer, the Food Network gave us some of their advertising on taxi tops, promoting the summer meals campaign, encouraging people to call 311 to see where they could get their local summer meals, the best summer meals. And the results of that are real. Thanks to this collaborative effort this past summer, the number of summer meals served at those 300 summer meal sites increased by 322,000 more meals than the year before.
Wow.
So this kind of collaborative work can really make a difference.
It's terrific. Questions from the audience for any of our panelists? I'm happy to keep asking questions too, but you all took the time to come. Yes.
What role do you feel technology plays in your respective efforts, and in particularly in getting the word out, or do you feel it's important? I'm Dawn Barber. I co-founded New York Tech Meetup. We actually had a whole tech team organized for Sandy as well.
Great. So maybe if I could also add an addendum to that. What role could technology play if it doesn't already, and maybe how could some of the people in the room help with that? Rain.
I'm happy to talk about that. So I think we have always embraced technology and tried to find the right balance between sort of helping people connect locally and share ideas And thanks to a lot of advances in sort of crowdsourcing and bringing people together, bringing small ideas and being able to elevate those, we at two of our initiatives, the Alliance for a Healthier Generation, but also Health Matters, we're building crowdsourcing platforms where at the local level as well as nationally, people can exchange solutions in real time, which is something that we've used a lot of manpower in the past to do. Like I said, when somebody had a great idea on the ground, in Dallas, Texas, it took a little manpower to kind of elevate that up and get it over to New York and to some of other communities. But through crowdsourcing platforms and through some other apps and some work that we're doing with some of our major corporate partners, media and technology partners like, well, I won't name names because I don't want to advertise for anyone, but essentially they've helped us build these platforms where we do the same thing in real time. So when that teacher who's on the ground in Dallas has an idea and wants to send that up, she gets immediate feedback on, is that idea working? Are other people interested in that? And when we see that other schools are interested in that, then great, then we add the manpower to go and take that program and to invest in that and to bring it to as many schools as possible. So technology is playing, I think, a larger and larger role for us, and we're getting more and more excited, and the more people see how it works, the more invested they become in it. So it's a very exciting time for us in terms of technology. Great.
I would just add really quickly for us, leveraging technology is something that continues to be an emerging practice for us, but one way we use it right now that's very instrumental is in managing data on students. And so part of what we try to do is have a very data-driven perspective in terms of how we provide supports, provide interventions to kids that we can then track and measure how they're doing, performing over time. And so one thing we do right now is we do on the back end have the folks that are in schools entering data into a system that allows us to see, we gave a child 2 hours of math tutoring this week. We did that for a month. When we gave them another retest, did they perform at a grade level higher or a performance level higher than what they started? So I would definitely say it's something that we can continue to get sharper and better on, but that's just one way that we're using it right now.
And Erica, you use that across all 22 of your schools here?
We do. We use that across, and I neglected to say this earlier, I talked about our New York presence. So we city here in about 24 different cities across the country. We have about 2,500 Laurens that are in schools helping and supporting kids, and that data practice is something that we scale and use nationwide. Thank you.
For us, technology is very much an ability to be able to scale, and that's the challenge. The need is so great. How do we reach as many people as possible? So this summer, for the first time, we did a texting program around summer meals where folks could text a number and then get back the closest summer meals location to them.
And was that text free?
That text was free for them. Yes, nice. The cost was picked up by us. So, with the significant usage of cell phones by low-income communities, that was, we found a very effective way to spread the news and also to get families connected to resources that exist.
And are you looking to roll that program out so that it could be year-round?
It's a great question. There exist other hotlines that already exist that people can access year-round, but I think that is something that we want to look at, which is, look, if people are communicating in different ways, we need to meet them where they're at. So whether or not that means developing smartphone apps as part of our Shopping Matters program so that when folks go to the supermarket, they're able to get tips about how to make their dollars go farther, whether or not that be a texting program as well, or Facebook advertising. A surprising number of this target population is, for example, using Facebook and is searching on Google for food assistance.
Clearly, all of you work with young people and children, sort of digital natives. How are you thinking about technology to help you better serve not only the families of the young people and kids you're working with, but also the kids themselves?
It's a really good question, Chelsea. I'm going to pause for a minute while I collect my thoughts on that one.
No, I think, we have a youth advisory board that is comprised of youth so that they can help us with things like these where, kind of those of us who are the older professionals who maybe aren't in touch with all the latest technology and what children are using. Because we serve children, that's the population we work on behalf of. We feel it's so important that they tell us how to best reach them. And so I don't know that I have the answer as much to say that I think what's important for us is that we do have young people telling us what is the best way to engage them. And if this week it's Twitter, if next week it's tout, if, it seems like it's always something different and we can barely keep up. But they also tell us best sort of not just the medium to use, but when we're using that medium, kind of what are the messages that most resonate with them. So I think that's just as important for us.
Yeah. And I think for us, one thing I would point to is I think your point about meeting folks in the spaces where they are is very critical. Yes. One thing I will say we work very closely with the mayor's office on an attendance monitoring initiative where, especially as students get older, I think there are other distractions, shall we say, that may take their time and attention away from school. And so one initiative we do have where we use technology is texting. And believe it or not, it actually works. Like a student getting a text from a core member to actually say, like, hey, remember you've got that period that starts at 8 o'clock, or getting a wake-up call actually does have an impact and an effect. And it seems like such a little thing, but being able to have a core that we can deploy to do that, leveraging an easy, low-cost way to do it, I think makes it highly effective.
So I follow all of these organizations on Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
And I love how frequently you retweet core members.
Make better happen.
Yeah,
yes.
It's terrific.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yes.
I wonder about the use of technology, especially in the lower income populations that you guys are often serving. And if you want to know how technology can help, maybe some of the models that we see in small towns, women's organizations in Africa or South America, tweeting is fine, but we're an audience that has smartphones. Mm-hmm. These kids don't necessarily. Mm-hmm. So could you address that, please?
Interesting.
Ooh, that's a tough one. Yeah, a lot of them have cell phones, but
yeah,
not smartphones.
Do, not necessarily smartphones. Yeah.
Which is why I think they rely on texting predominantly. Yeah. Is that right?
Yeah, it is. That is one of the reasons that we use, because most kids do have some type of phone where they can interact, and not email, not any other kind of messaging, but that is, one of the key assets they use, and that's where we meet them for right now. I think the other thing for us is also thinking constantly about how do we improve the technology available in schools. So although they may not have access to that technology at home, if we can come up with creative solutions to get them access to computers, to email, to Twitter, to social nets. Exactly, that would be amazing. Thank you so much for bringing that up.
Yes, ma'am, right there. Yeah.
Hi, thank you all for your time. My name is Hindi. I'm from the Jewish Community Relations Council in New York. So I think a few of you touched on the notion of coordination and data tracking and all of that. And I'm wondering, number one, if there's any kind of sharing of data. If some of you are working in similar schools, is there cross-collaboration in talking about the data that each of you have seen? And even more importantly, what happens when these kids age out of your programs? Who does the baton get passed to? Do they see the data that you guys have collected over the years, and how does that process work?
So I can talk about, so one of the hallmarks of our model is to try to also figure out how do we provide something we call a continuum of care to students through grades, from grades 3 through 9, right? Our thought is when you look at the data, when you look at what is the real leverage point in terms of stemming the dropout crisis, if you can get more students to 10th grade on track and on time, that is going to tip the scale. It's going to tip the needles in your favor. So one thing we do in that vein is we try to think about how do we work with schools that feed into each other. So a child that you start with in 3rd grade will end up in a school you're working in for middle school and a school you're working in for high school. It doesn't work because New York is very complex and we don't have very clean feeder pattern systems. The other thing that we're piloting right now, though, is we do have an initiative. Right now it's only in 3 of our schools. We're working with 2 other nonprofit organizations, and the thought is to provide a holistic state of care to a student. So we think about what is City Year best positioned to provide, and that's the human capital, the boots on the ground. It's the tutoring, it's the call, hey, you're not at school, it's the behavior coaching. But then we also think about the other needs that kids have that we are not equipped to address, and this goes back to your point and my point about we don't at all have the ego to say we're going to now develop that competency when there are other organizations out there that do it well. So what we're doing as part of that collaborative is we're partnering with 2 other organizations, and we're basically sharing data across the organizations to try to figure out how does all of that data tell a complete story about a student, what they need, and what type of intervention we should be providing, and how those needs are evolving over time. So that's one thing that we're doing right now, and it's a pilot. So hopefully if successful, we would scale that, but we're tracking and monitoring.
Rain? Oh, sorry.
And
sorry.
I would say, you know, for us, we know that what gets measured gets done. So just as important as the work that we do, and we work with, you know, students in the aggregate, so across an entire school that's of low socioeconomic status, and we work across the cohort for 4 years. So we're tracking, you know, what's happening in that school for 4 years, and we have what we call a graduation program. It's not for when the students graduate, but it's for when we're done giving intensive technical assistance in that school for 4 years. We are constantly sharing all of our data, but then at the end of our 4-year technical assessment period, we pass that on to all the other supporting organizations, and we hold trainings, and we do work very closely with them to make sure that the school sustains those changes, and same with any of the community level we work. So just as important for us is sharing all of the data constantly and telling the story about what we're doing, because we want this to be replicable and scalable by other organizations, even if they're working on different issues. It's all about the concept of growing the pie. So we're trying to tell there about the data and having people take a look and see what's possible and what's replicable.
I would just add that, you know, what you have heard from Rain and from Erica, I think emphasizes the fact that organizations that have data-driven approaches that are able to define measurable impacts, develop metrics that can be tracked, is really what is in our mind, distinguishing those most effective nonprofits from those that eventually will be on the sidelines. So, for example, in the summer meals campaign, every 2 weeks over the summer, the city and the key city agencies help coordinate a phone call with all the nonprofits, the Department of Education, and the key agencies that reach this population to go over summer meals data and to be able to say, here's where participation is low. And then we were able to help mobilize resources, feet on the ground, phone calls, pieces of mail to those, for example, housing agencies or housing sites where participation was low and where there was an ability to affect it. So it's crucial in terms of being able to really deploy strategies that really are data-driven.
Great, thank you. And thank you, Rain, Erica, Josh, for being with us this morning. Thank you all for coming. I hope that now, yes, please give them a round of applause.
I think your panelists and their organizations have taken responsibility in a 21st century proactive way, have the metrics, because on the giving side, we want to give to organizations that are effective. We want our money to be used in the proper way, and so we'll be monitoring those metrics as we move forward. But I think everybody in this room has taken responsibility, or else you wouldn't be sitting here this morning. And you know, I am personally optimistic seeing this panel, you, Chelsea, my son and future daughter-in-law, and the young and the youth that are here, because they want to be engaged, they want to be helpful, and they want to do the right thing, as I think as everybody in this room. We wish all of you a healthy and happy holiday, and let's keep doing what we're doing. Thank you very much.